There is a grain you are not supposed to see, a plant you only have to sow once. After that, it regrows, year after year, sometimes for decades. No replanting, no seasonal reset. Its roots drive deep into the earth, pulling water from soil most crops never touch, anchoring land that normally erodes away. Fields of it can stand through droughts that destroy ordinary grain. And yet, you will not find it in stores. Not because it failed, but because it broke the rules modern agriculture depends on. This is the story of the seed that can keep feeding itself for 25 years, and why a system built on replanting made it disappear. It's a perennial grain, one of the only ones humans have ever tried to farm. For most of ecological time, the earth fed itself through permanence. Prairies covered the Great Plains for millennia without a single plow. Grasslands stretched across Asia and Europe, producing seed heads every summer from root systems that never died. No one cleared the field. No one turned the soil. The plants returned because returning was what they did. Food came from systems that were renewed by nature. Fields were not surfaces to be destroyed and rebuilt each year. They were living architectures, dense with roots that held water, cycled nutrients, and fed the organisms that made soil fertile. Before agriculture, the ground was not bare between harvests. It was covered, protected, perpetually alive. This is the world our ancestors inherited. Deep-rooted grasses stabilized hillsides. Perennial legumes fixed nitrogen from air into earth. The land did not require rescue because it had not yet been wounded. When humans began to farm, they inherited 10,000 years of accumulated fertility. Soil so rich it seemed inexhaustible, but the crops they chose would change everything. The grains that built civilization were annual. Annual means one thing: every harvest begins with erasure. Before the age of plowing, some cultures understood a different way. They harvested from grasses that came back on their own. Intermediate wheatgrass, a perennial native to the region between the Black Sea and the Caspian, produced edible grain year after year from the same root mass. It did not require reseeding. It did not demand tillage. You could cut the heads, thresh the seed, and return the following summer to find the field already green. This was grain farming without annual destruction. One planting yielded decades of food. The concept seems impossible now because modern agriculture trained us to believe grain must come from plants that die. But nature did not design it that way. The prairies of North America, the steppes of Central Asia, and the grasslands of South America all operated on perennial logic. Grasses returned, roots persisted. Soil deepened instead of eroding. What changed was not the biology of plants. What changed was the system humans built around them. The decision to center agriculture on annuals was not inevitable. It was a choice. And one grain still alive today shows exactly what that choice erased. This is Kernza. It is a perennial wheatgrass bred for human consumption. It is the grain form of intermediate wheatgrass developed over decades by the Land Institute in Kansas and now grown on nearly 4,000 acres across North America. One planting, harvests for years, no annual reseeding, no seasonal destruction of the root system. The plant stays alive beneath the soil, storing energy, rebuilding structure, and preparing for the next season without human intervention. It produces a small, nutty grain that contains 50% more protein than wheat and over 100% more fiber. Nutritionally dense, rich in antioxidants, and naturally suited to organic production because its perennial growth suppresses weeds without herbicides. Yet almost no one has heard of it. You will not find it on grocery shelves. You will not see it in commodity markets. It exists at the margins of agriculture, grown by a small network of farmers who believe the future of food depends on plants that do not require starting over every year. But the science is no longer fringe. Beneath this plant is something no annual grain can replicate. The secret is underground. While annual wheat sends roots down about 3 feet, Kernza roots can reach 10 feet or more. This massive root architecture does more than anchor the plant. It accesses water and minerals that shallow-rooted crops cannot reach. It survives drought by tapping moisture stored deep in the subsoil. It survives winter by storing energy in root tissue that stays alive when the ground freezes. And it does something annual crops almost never do. It improves the land it grows on. Studies show Kernza absorbs up to 96% more nitrate pollution than corn or soy. That nitrogen, instead of leaching into groundwater, stays in the plant and cycles back into the soil. The root mass also sequesters carbon. Research found that Kernza fields can remove more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere than they emit, making the crop net negative for greenhouse gas. This is not a marginal improvement. This is a fundamental reversal of the ecological damage grain farming has caused for 10,000 years. The roots do not just grow food, they rebuild what industrial agriculture destroyed. The difference between an annual and a perennial is the difference between extraction and investment. Annual crops pour all their energy into one reproductive cycle. They germinate, grow, flower, set seed, and die. Every calorie of sunlight is spent producing grain before the frost. There is no reserve, no plan for next year. Perennials operate on a longer timeline. They allocate resources not just to seed production, but to root storage, crown maintenance, and structural repair. This is why intermediate wheatgrass can persist for up to 50 years if managed well. It is not burning itself out. It is building permanent infrastructure beneath the soil. That infrastructure holds water. It prevents erosion. It feeds microbial communities that cycle nutrients back into forms plants can absorb. When the harvest is taken, the root system remains intact. There is no plowing, no compaction, no disruption of the fungal networks that connect plants underground. The field does not start over. It continues. Kernza grain yields are highest in the first 2 years, then decline. But total productivity over a decade rivals annual systems, which makes one question unavoidable. Why did agriculture abandon this model in the first place? 10,000 years ago, humans made a decision that shaped the fate of soil across the planet. In the Fertile Crescent, early farmers domesticated wheat, barley, and other grains, all of them annual, all of them requiring cleared ground, tilled soil, and replanting each season. This was not the only option. Perennial grains existed, but annuals were easier to breed. Their short life cycles allowed rapid selection for larger seeds and higher yields. Within a few generations, farmers could transform wild grass into a productive crop. Perennials required decades of selection to show improvement. Speed 1. Agriculture spread around the world carrying annual grains with it. Forests were cleared. Grasslands were plowed. Soil that accumulated for millennia began to erode. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s was not an accident. It was the inevitable result of a system designed around plants that leave the ground bare for months each year. By the 20th century, industrial agriculture had perfected the annual model. Tillage, chemical fertilizers, and synchronized harvests became the foundation of global food production. Perennial systems were forgotten. The annual system delivered results. Yields per acre increased dramatically. Uniform grain sizes made mechanical harvesting possible. Global shipping networks moved wheat from Kansas to Cairo. Commodity markets allowed farmers to sell crops before they were planted. The 20th century saw the greatest expansion of food production in history, feeding billions who would otherwise have starved. But the gains came with a cost. Annual crops require tillage, and tillage destroys soil structure. The Midwest has lost an average of nearly 7 inches of topsoil since farming began. 1/3 of the Corn Belt has lost its entire A horizon, the organic rich layer that makes soil fertile. Researchers estimate this degradation reduces crop yields by 6% and costs American farmers nearly $3 billion annually. Nitrogen runoff from annual fields contaminates drinking water. Erosion fills rivers with sediment. Carbon stored in soil for centuries is released into the atmosphere. The system that feeds the world is slowly consuming the foundation it depends on. Annual agriculture is productive, but it is not permanent. And it exposes why a grain like Kernza could never survive store shelves. If Kernza is so promising, why is it not everywhere? The answer is structural. Modern agriculture was built for annual crops. Equipment is designed for crops that ripen uniformly and then die on schedule. Supply chains expect predictable volumes at predictable times. Seed companies profit from farmers who must repurchase every year. Perennial grain disrupts all of this. Kernza seeds are smaller than wheat. They mature at slightly different rates. First-year yields are lower than established annual crops, even though multi-year productivity can match them. There is no existing infrastructure for processing or distributing perennial grain at scale. The economics are inverted. A crop that does not need replanting does not generate repeat seed sales. A crop that does not need synthetic fertilizer does not generate chemical revenue. A crop that suppresses weeds naturally does not require herbicide contracts. Kernza is not a product cycle. It is a living system. Living systems do not fit neatly into supply chains designed for commodities that must be purchased again and again. Kernza offers regeneration instead. The pressures that erased perennial grain are now reversing. Climate change is making annual systems increasingly unstable. Droughts stress shallow-rooted crops. Floods wash away exposed soil. Input costs for fertilizer and fuel continue to rise. Farmers in vulnerable regions are looking for alternatives that reduce risk and rebuild land. The first commercial variety, MN Clearwater, was released in 2019 by the University of Minnesota. By 2021, yields had more than doubled compared to earlier trials. New breeding techniques are accelerating development, completing 2 selection cycles per year instead of 1. General Mills began incorporating Kernza into products through its Cascadian Farm brand. Patagonia Provisions launched a beer brewed with 15% Kernza grain. Restaurants from San Francisco to Minneapolis are featuring it on menus. The crop is no longer theoretical. It is entering the food system. Not as a replacement for wheat, but as a regenerative option for landscapes that can no longer sustain the annual cycle. And what they are rediscovering forces a much bigger question about how farming was ever designed to work.